Ever wondered what truly builds trust in professional relationships? Trust isn't just a feeling, it's a formula. How can we break down that formula so that we actually can be incredibly intentional about building trust?
As a leader, trust is essential. It literally becomes like a currency. Now, as you become a leader, it's about establishing that trust and delivering as a leader, which gets more complex because there's now different inputs into the equation, not just yourself that needs to come out of it, but it needs to be much more of an intentional focus. So, Andre, it does turn into a formula, and it is a focus of all the leadership attributes that you work on together. One of the outputs is this thing called trust, this currency that you have to get things done. Can you maybe run through kind of what this idea of how we build trust?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite bits of work that has come out in the last couple of decades is from Charles Green, the trusted advisor, and the whole idea of how do you really unpack this thing called trust so you can be more intentional about it. So he developed this formula, which I have used a lot and I continue to use in my work with clients. And the formula is pretty simple. It's C plus R plus I divided by S. You're probably going, well, that's interesting, Andre. So let's break that down. So the first C stands for credibility. And when you're talking about credibility, it's being able to demonstrate your character and your competence. You've got to be competent as a leader. It's about acting like a leader. It's about being able to show up. It's how you show up. And we've talked about that in previous videos, Darren. It's running great meetings, right? Your competence as a leader is very much on display when you're running great meetings, or you're standing up to speak to a crowd or to an individual, and being very purposeful in your communication. So the first thing about credibility is being able to demonstrate you've got it. You've got the skills of being a leader. Now, in our Leadership Accelerator program, we talk about that as act like a leader. It's one of the chunks that we look at. That's the first bit, credibility. The second thing that Charles Green talks about, the R stands for reliability, which is making it happen. In our program, it's about this momentum that you create. It's being reliable, doing what you're saying you're going to do. If you say you're going to do something, you make it happen. It's being very intentional about forward momentum. Avoiding distractions. Darren, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think, yeah, it's exactly it is. It's starting to balance and constantly be thinking about what's most important, especially, as you hit different levels of complexity, there becomes an increasing level of priorities that come in. And so that you understand what's most important to your boss, to the organization, to your team, so that you can balance that with what's most important to you to constantly be delivering, again, that credibility that builds that trust.
Yeah, fantastic. The third thing in the formula is a really strange one. When you first look at it, and you go, oh, how does that fit? And it's intimacy. It's a C plus R, credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. So you need all three. What do you mean by intimacy? And the idea of intimacy here is how well you understand the person you're talking to, how well you can engage not just the head, but also the heart, the emotions. We talk about listening for the subtext of what's going on rather than just for the text. What might be some of the emotions? It's being really curious about the other person by asking great questions. It's telling a story. It's getting buy-in, as we've also mentioned. So these are the things that connect us and create this intimacy that's really required in trust.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that, Darren?
Well, again, it's so important that, what we've talked about before is that it's about moving from transactional to relational, is that you're investing in the relationship.
Very much so. So credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, critical. It's not enough, because all of those things are very important, but they can all be wiped away for one thing, which is the denominator, the thing that's below the line in our trust equation, which is the S, which stands for self-orientation, right? And as you and me have spoken about so much, Darren, it's the thinking like a leader, is being able to move from me to we. It's where you focus your time and energy. Do you focus it on the task? Do you focus it on the team? What's the climate that you kind of build? So this self-orientation, and as you and me have talked about previously, those bad leaders, average leaders, I should say, are very much focused on a self-orientation. It's about protecting themselves, focus on what I have to do. Take all of that away in terms of trust.
Absolutely. Yeah? You often see that show up as my goals or my value drivers are more important than yours, right? And they need to be at least equal, right? And so that is where you see trust erode, is when people put their objectives ahead of the other person's. And that erodes it, absolutely. And depending on the circumstance, can wipe it out very quickly and can be very hard to gain it back.
And when you sit down and think about our Leadership Accelerator program, Darren, it is built around this idea of trust. As you talk about, this is that X factor that is needed. So if you think about credibility, the C, we address that is in acting like a leader in our module. When you think about reliability, it's about making it happen, how you keep the momentum going. If you think about intimacy in Leadership Accelerator, it's about engaging emotions. And if you think about the self-orientation, the denominator, it's about thinking like a leader, not as an individual or an authority. So it's interesting, isn't it, when you sit down and look at it, that if you really want to build this trust with your team and with individuals and with stakeholders, this formula can really help you decode what are some things you may want to invest some time in. Are you a little bit too self-driven? Okay, that's taking away from the top line. Are you as intimate as you need to be with your team? Maybe you need to up that. What about demonstrating your character and competence, your credibility, and how you lead? Are you doing that? So I think it's a really good way for any person to sit down and think about how they're going about their leadership.
Fantastic. And that's why we've created the Leader Accelerate program, because of the modules that you can go through and do a real in-depth deep dive in each of those areas, as you just outlined. But we also have, of course, the ebook with the 17 very high-level strategies that allow people to pull things out of there to help establish trust, maintain trust. Sometimes people need to, even correct, right? Fix some trust issues that have occurred that might not even be their fault, but they still are in that situation where they need to rebuild some trust. So the 17 strategies can help with all of those. So certainly recommend going to the ebook. You can download that and exploring the Accelerate program, because it can absolutely help you to dive in more deeply into all of these areas that Andres talked about.
The links are just below. Have a look.